Hi, everybody. I'm just going to get my Instagram going, and then we will get this Q&A going for Crushing Doubt. Just give me 1 second, and I will have this up and running. All right, there we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Crushing Doubt's Q&A, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I do owe some apologies because I was supposed to be here last week, but it turned out that I wasn't able to be for multiple reasons, but one of them being that I was finishing up my book. And that's the first thing I like to say, share with you all, is that it's actually done, completely finished. It will be out in September. I'm working on publishing plans, so I'll keep you all posted on that. But I was in the thick of finishing up that literally a week ago, and I can tell you, not only does it feel really good, but I'm extremely excited to share it with you all. So I'll get into that shortly. But let me first do my usual introduction. I'm Dr. Dan Ratner. I'm here to talk about mind-body issues. And what are mind-body issues? They are symptoms, physical symptoms that come up because of what's going on in our minds. It could be from feelings, it could be from thoughts, but we all have hundreds, if not thousands, of mind-body symptoms every day. It is the human condition to have what goes on in your mind affect what goes on in your body. And if you think about it, that makes sense, because that's what crying is. You feel sad or sometimes happy, and actual tears roll down your face, or you feel embarrassed and the blood rushes to your face. And that's a physical change from something that's going on inside you. If you think about it, when you see somebody, if they get angry, you can see their whole face changes. Everything changes. We can read faces in part because of the mind-body process. We know whatever's going on in that mind is going on in that body. And so we read the body and we understand. So why do I do this? Well, for 8 years of my life, from ages 28 to 36, I had truly debilitating back pain every single day, every single moment of every single day for those 8 years. And I had no sense that I was going to be getting better. There was no way for me to know that. I had gone to doctors, and I had even had a doctor tell me I probably would have this for the rest of my life. There were no solutions that seemed to be coming out of medicine. I knew about the idea of psychosomatic issues, which is another term for mind-body issues within psychology, but I would go to a psychologist and talk to them about it, and they didn't seem to know anything about it. There were no fields that seemed to know much about it. I went to a chiropractor who was very helpful in a certain way, especially in his encouragement and hopefulness and wisdom, but he couldn't get me even close to half better. And I just did not understand what was happening. So what ended up happening is I got introduced to Dr. John Sarno, as many of you in the audience will attest to, because you probably had similar experiences, or many people have, or have at least heard of Dr. Sarno. I was told about his work. And when I checked out his books, I was really blown away right away. One of the things that I was blown away right away about is that all of these structural ideas that people talk about, meaning structures of the body, like a herniated disc or a torn rotator cuff or whatever we think is the structure of the body, those things don't actually cause the pain and other symptoms. There are studies that show when they study people with no symptoms, they often have a train wreck of an MRI. And then sometimes they study people who have a lot of symptoms and their MRIs are fine. There's no correlation between these structural ideas. Even though it seems logical, turns out not to be. So that was the first thing. The next thing is finding out that, emotional experience could really drive these symptoms. And as I started to accept these ideas, this was the one that really blew me away. My pain went away. Now, it took me about 2 months to integrate the information and really start to believe it. But once I started to believe it, I got better in 3 days. Now, I don't want that to alarm anybody who hasn't gotten better fast, because that's a particular type of recovery. That's what's called a book recovery. I did have a book recovery, but I also didn't have a book recovery with other symptoms. Mind-body symptoms operate in many different ways, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. One of the ways that I had to get better is I had so many questions, even after reading Dr. Sarno, and I needed good answers. Because if we're going to believe in anything, it's got to be from good answers. So it was all science and logic. I started asking questions. I started getting lots of answers. What that showed me is that changing my thinking was the key. The onset and uptick of symptoms, that happens for emotional reasons. But the reason that symptoms just stay there is because whatever we think stays the same in our mind. If that stays the same in our minds, it stays the same in our bodies. Our physiologies take our cues from our thinking. So we're going to get into talking about my system for how to recognize the cause of symptoms and knowing what to do about them. As I got answers, I understand it much more, and I'm going to get into that shortly. I'm going to say hi to some people, then I'll get back to my system, and then we'll get into questions. Okay, first of all, Karen Isaacs, good to see you here. I see you said I'll be out, but looking forward to listening later. So when you listen to this later, hello, Karen. Good to have you with us. Hillel, hi, Dan and everyone. Good to see you. Hillel, and Lynn Slavensky says hi, Dan and everyone as well. It's a familiar refrain coming from lots of people. Susan Serino. Susan, I'm glad you got your name in there. You're no longer represented by David Serino. Hillel says, excited for the book. Thank you, Hillel. I cannot wait to share it with you all. I'm really, really excited. It's going to add a lot even to this Q&A because we all will have a very similar set of ideas that we can talk about. So I can't wait to do that with you. Kasim says, good evening, Dan. Good to see you, Kasim. Teresa, thank you for joining us here. And Darjoy Perk, Darlene, thank you for joining us here. Rita, good to see you. Thanks for saying hi. Chris Kalaskos, thank you for joining us here on Instagram. I think this is the first time I've seen you here, but please do let me know if you have any questions. This is true for anybody, by the way. If you're coming in for the first time and you want to hear what it is that I'm talking about, there's no stupid questions. So just ask me, what are we talking about here? Backing up, mind, body, symptoms. We're talking about symptoms that happen because of what we think and feel, and my system helps get that under control. So let me explain that system, and then we'll dive into questions. My system is called the column system, and it got that name. Of course, I named it, but it happened because once I got better and I started working with people, I came to understand that there were really 3 different reasons people have symptoms. And so when I'd meet with people, I'd have them take a piece of paper and divide it into, you guessed it, 3 columns. And these columns would help us kind of take notes on what was happening in these 3 areas. These 3 areas are the emotions column, which is when your feelings lead to onsets and upticks in symptoms. The doubt column, which is when your thinking keeps those symptoms in place. So if they're lasting for months or years, that's a doubt column issue. I'll get into what that all means soon. And then there's the power column. The power column is for symptom plateaus, when you are getting a lot better, but you kind of get stuck and it just stays in the same place. So it stays in the same place similar to doubt, but it's much lower level. And there's a reason that these symptoms behave in these different ways. So let me explain a little bit about that. In these columns, each symptom has a particular function. In the emotions column, that function is distraction. The symptom onset or uptick comes in because it wants to distract us from knowing about an unconscious emotional experience. It covers it over because what grabs your attention more than a symptom? That's just for the onsets and upticks. So when an onset or an uptick happens, we're going to look at emotions. If a symptom has been there for a long time, it's for a different reason. It's not for that distraction function. Distraction doesn't work for 8 years. What happens instead is the function of doubt column symptoms is protection. Doubt thinks you're in danger. Anytime it thinks you're in any kind of danger, it's going to make you doubt and think and think. What do I do about this? What do I do about this? And it keeps the wheels turning. So it keeps that thinking happening over and over and over, and it protects you from going anywhere. But ultimately, we want to get places, and we're not actually in the danger doubt thinks. So we've got to dismantle the doubt to be able to move forward. In the power column, there's a third function. It's not distraction. It's not protection. It's communication. The reason we get to plateaus is once you've got doubt down nice and low, once you learn about the emotions, all that's left is that a part of you wants you to know about some things that you're upset about underneath, broad emotional things. And that is why the function in the power column is communication. There's a part of you that wants you to understand something deep about yourself that you weren't understanding, and the symptoms aren't going to just give up until you get it. So those are the 3 reasons that symptoms happen. When we go through these questions, I want to encourage you, ask your questions, but always follow up. They need to be answered to your satisfaction. If I don't get it the first time around, keep asking questions, because that's the key to getting better. As soon as you know everything about what's happening and why, your doubt will come down and you'll be able to see the emotional stuff underneath and recognize those onsets and upticks. And then everything slides over to the power column. Everything heads towards power. So the way the system works, bring down any doubts you have about it being mind-body, about your symptom being masterable, about you being able to do it, whatever it is. We've got to bring that doubt down. Then we learn about the emotions in the emotions column. to get that awareness so the distraction isn't there anymore. And then everything flows towards power. Power, by the way, is an emotional column. The emotions and power columns are both emotional columns, but the difference is in the emotions column, you're simply looking to get awareness of the basic ideas. In the power column, we're looking to get awareness of the very broad ideas, and we're looking to make adjustments. It's not just about awareness, it's about change. Okay, I hope that made sense, but you guys can always follow up with questions. The system may seem hard to understand or complex at certain times at first, but I've actually made it very simple, and my questions will show you how. Okay. K8 Sykes, thanks for joining us on Instagram. Good to see you here. We're going to get into some questions now. All right. Hillel says, one of my numerous conditioned movements. I'll get into what a conditioned movement is in a second. If a regular chair doesn't, quote, feel as it perfectly supports my lower back, it should cause pain every F time. And then he says, I know it's bullshit, but it just feels like the truth. I know it's just doubt, but when I try to counter it, it doesn't make sense. Other arguments, etc. Both doubt and the pain stay. Any tips? So I will get into tips, but let's first observe this. So Hillel, when you say it just feels like the truth, this is a very important point. And I want you all to think about this. Doubt is always going to feel like the truth. It's not just going to come out and say something that doesn't feel like the truth because you would never believe it. It is supposed to be convincing, and it is very convincing. So it's always going to feel like the truth. You have to not buy the truth from doubt. I call doubt a pathological liar. Hillel, you know this, but I'm just reminding you of that. But it may help you to realize the fact that it feels like the truth is not only irrelevant, but it's how you would describe every effective doubt. If it doesn't feel like the truth, it's not even going to work. So doubt does feel like the truth all the time. Now let's go back to the specific one. You said one of my numerous conditioned movements. For anyone who doesn't know what that means, a conditioned movement or a conditioned response is how you respond to an expected situation. So he's saying if I sit in a regular chair and it doesn't feel as if it perfectly supports him, it should cause pain in his lower back. That's the expectation Hillel has about this. And as a result, remember, whatever we think up here becomes real in our body. I sometimes think of the body as just a giant brain. And so if you're thinking that's going to happen, it does. Now, Hillel's saying, what do I do about that? You know, he knows it's bullshit. So, but it feels like the truth. One thing you can sweep past, Hillel, is recognizing that just because it feels like the truth is not only irrelevant to whether it is true, but is actually exactly what any doubt is like. That could help you move past that and say, well, I'm not listening to that. But I think what you're also saying is when you counter it, it doesn't make sense, or you come up with other arguments, both the doubt and the pain stay. Now, there's many reasons that doubt can stay. In the doubt column, there's certain tasks within the columns in terms of how you would need to work. And in the doubt column, it's observe, articulate, and counter. To observe a doubt is to call it into question. A lot of times we are aware of the thought, we have the thought, but we actually just think it's true. Now, Hillel's doing a good job here saying it's bullshit. It feels like the truth, but he is calling it into question enough to have observed it. The next step is to articulate, put it into words. So, Hillel, what I'm feeling here is we need to get this more put into words. Why do you think that doubt? What is it about that makes the doubt stay? What is it saying? So it could be saying, yeah, okay, that it doesn't make sense, but you can't prove it otherwise. And it's putting all the burden of proof on you. And then we would need to turn around and say, no, the burden of proof is on you. You're the one you doubt are the one who is saying definitively what something is, right? And Hillel, you're getting much better at this. You're recognizing what you need to do is not necessarily be so certain that it is wrong, but at least be certain that it's not clearly right. It doesn't know the answer. So that's observing it, articulating it. We got to get more put into words. So what are you still doubting about that? Let's do a follow-up on that, Hillel. The next step is articulate. So let's find out what does the doubt then say when you know this is bullshit. Get it put into words because that gives us a chance to really fight it on solid ground. We need to know, what are you saying to yourself about the idea that this regular chair, if it doesn't feel like it perfectly supports you, why should that cause you any pain? I understand that's what you think, but I want to get it put into words. All right, let's follow up from there. All right, give me one sec. All right, Darlene. Hi, Dan. Having small wins followed by big setbacks. It's frustrating and scary. How do I navigate this roller coaster ride? P.S. Glad to see Hillel. So they know each other from group. A lot of times in the Crushing Doubt community, people know each other through that. And I will get into that, what's on the website and the resources, including the groups, shortly. But Darlene says, I felt so defeated this morning. Okay, well, I'm sorry you're feeling defeated, Darlene, but good news, at least as I see it. It's only doubt. There's only one thing that can ever derail you guys from getting better in this, and that's doubt. All three columns are important, but the key column to make sure that you get better is to master the doubt, or at least be fighting it. There's a reason that this channel is called Crushing Doubt, and it's not called Crushing with the Columns or Crushing Emotion or Recognizing Emotion or Coming into Power. It's doubt is first and foremost. If doubt is there, we got to get in there. So Darlene, what I hear in this, of course, is doubt. I know you know that, but recognizing that could help you, because when we recognize doubt, and I remind you, guess what? There are things we can do about doubt, and you don't have to do it alone. So one thing to remember is I didn't have my Q&A last week. I've been off from group for certain days. And so you've been having a little less help with that. I'm back. I'll be helping. You don't have to do this alone. But the key is not to have no doubt. Everybody has doubt. The key is to keep making sure that you're putting up a wall against doubt. Make it work. Doubt, it's not a hard worker. It wants to give up. It will give up with enough resistance. So put up some resistance, and I'm going to help you do that. I'm going to get into the specifics here. But just like I said with Hillel, the steps are observe, articulate, and counter. This needs articulation right here, Darlene, and I don't mean that critically. I mean it sportively. There's a specific doubt here. So you might be saying to yourself, every time I get a win, I get a big setback. So that means the doubt's always gaining more ground than I'm gaining, and I'm always going to lose that way. I'm not saying that is the doubt, but maybe that is. So if you want to navigate this roller coaster ride, first of all, we can get this roller coaster ride under control, because the source, the driver of the roller coaster is doubt. So let's get it articulated. What are you saying to yourself? I'll give you another example, Darlene. I'm not saying this is it, but if you're having small wins followed by big setbacks, you could be saying to yourself, I know that I'm making gains, but it seems like my ability to stop doubt is not very high. I can't do it. I have doubts about me. That's something I call level 3 doubt. There's 3 levels of doubt. Level 1 doubt is it mind, body, or not? Level 2 is my symptom harder to master, my mind, body symptom harder to master than others? And level 3 is, can I do it? So I don't know what the doubt is here, Darlene, but there's a doubt here. And what I want to do is look for that. Let's look for the doubt and find what's going on here. Okay, let's start there. And you can follow up right here, Darlene, and then we'll go from there. Okay, Susie Cairns, good to see you here. LJP Wright, thank you for joining us here. And Felipe Cabrera, thank you for joining us here. Good to see you. So please do let me know. Again, this is all about asking your questions. People, I once spoke with somebody who, she kind of laughed when I said what I did, because what I do essentially is I answer questions. I help people ask the questions too. But she was like, that's all that helps. And I was like, yep. Because if you get your questions answered, it changes your mind. And if it changes your mind, it changes your body. And that's it in a nutshell, what I do. I just am very good at knowing what questions to ask and how to answer them. And that's what we're going to keep doing. Scotty Styles, thank you for joining us. He says, oh, hello. And then the usual beautiful emojis from you, Scotty. Thank you. I do hope you're coming to there is a conference, the PPDA conference in Boulder in September. I believe it starts on the 26th of September. Anybody who's interested in joining that, feel free to email me, dan@crushingdoubt.org. I will be there. I'll be speaking on how I run groups, among other things, and would love to talk with all of you about it. Okay, let's get back to some questions here. Okay, Susan says, you can have normal abnormalities on an MRI, X-ray, etc., and the pain is still mind-body. Exactly. In fact, pain especially has no correlation to any of these structures. You can sometimes have something where it's like if you have a rotator cuff problem and you have mobility problems with your shoulder, that can happen some, although a lot of that is stiffness and mind-body restrictions as well. But with pain, it almost never has anything to do with that. Now, listen, if you break your arm, that will hurt for the set amount of time that a broken arm usually hurts. But then it just heals. Everything heals. Anything that lasts beyond, I mean, look, a broken bone heals in 12 weeks tops. Anything that lasts beyond that, of any kind, it makes no sense for it to continue. Now, of course, it makes sense from a mind-body standpoint in that if we're expecting it to hurt or the pathways are open and the nerves are firing and all that, it's going to hurt. But we got to know it's for mind-body reasons. It's not going to be for structural reasons. So, Susan, I think you were saying that kind of when I was talking about things initially. As Scotty Styles says, all injuries heal and scars don't hurt. They don't. Sometimes people are like, oh, I think the issue is scar tissue. Scar tissue doesn't hurt. Touch a scar. I'm sure many of you have it. Touch it. It doesn't cause any pain at all. Why would it on the inside? And that's what's getting argued. All these kind of, they truly sound crazy to me now. These arguments. I used to just believe them because that's what was being said, especially by doctors. But if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. If scars on the inside hurt, then scars on the outside should hurt, and they don't. So thanks for bringing that up, Scotty. Okay. Kasim, good to see you here. When I fully accept my trauma, will I no longer have trauma activations? Great question. Okay, so here's what I'm going to say about that. When you fully accept your trauma, and let me first talk about what that means. The phrase fully accept your trauma or accept the fullness of your trauma is something that I say in the power column. That is about recognizing in full what happened to you so that you really can feel it. And a lot of times when people get there, they mourn that. They're there for like usually a couple months, feeling the heaviness of recognizing what happened to them. And they process that and they get to a very different place about it. So Kasim's asking about that. What will that place look like? And will it not have trauma activation? Now, trauma activation is when an event in the present brings back the past so strongly that you feel like you're back in that trauma. That's a trauma activation. Your body starts to respond in that same old way. And it's like you're back in it. And your mind, the things you think, will be totally different when you're having a trauma activation. So I'm going to answer this the first time, Kasim, but then I want you to follow up as needed. When you fully accept trauma and you process it, there will be ways in which you won't have that trauma ever again. You won't have certain trauma activations because you will have mastered whatever that's about. However, human beings have trauma activation all the time. We all are going to have some trauma activation. And what I can say is this. Some trauma activations won't happen because you've accepted the fullness of your trauma. Some trauma activations will be significantly lessened because of that. You also will gain the ability to recognize trauma activation faster. So everything starts to get better. But I wouldn't want you to hold yourself to, even though I understand the wish, get rid of it entirely. I think of trauma activation as, first of all, trauma activation is like a mega form of doubt. So everybody can have it sometimes, but you'll have it a lot less. It'll be a lot less extreme. Some of them will be gone entirely if you've really settled that. And so just everything gets better. You'll be able to recognize it faster. You'll be able to cope with it better, and you'll just become better and better at it. I don't get activated by trauma very often these days. And when I do, it's mild and I can recognize it fast. So I will say this, Kasim, one thing you can expect is a life with a lot less emotional upheaval. Now, that's my short, I say it's a short answer. It's kind of a long answer, but let me see what you think about that and we'll go from there. Okay. Darlene has a follow-up. Anticipatory fear before going to therapy. Therapist mentioned I may want to consider meds. Let's see. I don't. My doubt is is on meds. I will never get better. I think that's what you're saying. There was a little bit of a typo there. You said I'm a terrible tiny screen typist. Sorry. Tiny screens are pretty hard. My fear is if I don't go on meds, I will never get better. Got it. Therapist didn't say that, but it's how I feel. Okay, this is a great example of an articulated doubt. It's one thing for Darlene to say, I'm worried I won't get better, but let's look at the specifics. Why doesn't she feel she'll get better? Well, she just laid it out. If I don't go on meds, I'll never get better. Now, maybe she doesn't want to go on meds at the same time, and then that's a thorny thing. But whatever it is, it's leaving you in a place of doubt, Darlene. So I will say this. I know you can get better without meds. I'm also not at all opposed to meds. They can help lots of people. It doesn't matter either way you go with it. What matters is, are you getting what you need? And are you thinking about things in the right way? So I would rather, for example, have somebody take meds and believe they can get better than not take meds and believe they can't. And I would rather, if you are going to take meds, that you can get better without them anyway. I don't want that doubt there. So let's deconstruct this. Why? Let's keep articulating. There's often a doubt underneath the doubt. Why, Darlene, do you think you won't get better without meds? What are you saying to yourself? Is it, I have a chemical imbalance, which, by the way, I don't tend to believe in a lot. It can happen in very extreme circumstances, but most people with depression and anxiety, they don't have a chemical imbalance. The chemicals get imbalanced because of what we're feeling. It's not the other way around. So we got to nail what this is. Let's keep digging. What's next? Underneath that, why do you think that if you're not on meds, you won't get better? I'm not saying that critically. I'm saying it supportively, but let's look at it. Okay, Nox Flamma, thanks for joining us here. And Rody Jangles, good to see you back as well. I do hope I didn't miss anybody. If I ever do, please do let me know, including a question. All right, back over to YouTube. We've got a question coming in from Susan. Okay, overcoming nocebos from doctors. So let me just say what a nocebo is. The placebo effect is when we believe something is going to help us, and then it does because of that belief. Nocebos are we believe something is going to hurt us, and then it does because of those beliefs. So that's what she's referring to. Overcoming nocebos from doctors, the media, family, and friends is hard to do to overcome doubt. Totally agree with you, Susan, but let me see if you say anything further about it. Okay. So let me just comment on what your comment is saying. This is very important for you guys to think about in general. You all are facing a barrage of information all the time. We all are. Me too. We get it from doctors. We get it from the media. We get it from family. We get it from friends. And they're often these offhanded remarks. Oh, lift from the legs. Oh, you're going to catch a cold. Oh, my friend got better from back surgery. We're just bombarded with all kinds of information. And Susan knows that I say when you go to doctors or if you go on the internet, you got to put on what I call your doubt armor. You have to be ready to think for yourself and say, I'm not going to buy anything that you're saying unless it is rock solidly true. I'm going to be skeptical about it. And doing it with family and friends, also important. But I think one of the reasons Susan is saying it's hard to do to overcome doubt is that it's everywhere. It's so, I will say, it felt like a lonely part of the journey for me. Not in a way that ended up bad at all. But it was a challenge. It was a challenge to recognize I can't depend on any of these people not only to help me, but actually almost everything they say could be harmful to me because they didn't know about mind-body experience. Now, that is changing. Since I got better, the world is in I wouldn't say a much better spot than it was about this, but it's better. We are coming a long way in society towards people recognizing the mind-body experience. You're seeing publications in major newspapers, on major news networks. People are finally starting to get some of the idea. Are we there? No. I don't even think we're 10% there. I hope that my book will really help with this and we can just keep breaking it open. But the more people like us who do understand mind-body experience, who are talking to other people, the better. We want to be convincing them, not the other way around, because we're right and they're wrong. And there's so much disinformation. So, Susan, one of the challenges, and I'm noting this for you, but also for everybody else, is to recognize your own expertise. That actually you know better than almost all these people, if not all of them. There's going to be so much disinformation. And even doctors, and there are plenty of good ones who understand that there is some mind-body experience, but are they really adept at it? Do they know it in detail? No, not usually. And so they also have no idea what to do about it. But even if they know about it some, they're often going to say things that really kind of lead us astray or don't get at the main issue or inspire doubt. That would be the worst part. So we've got to protect ourselves from that, and we've got to get to a place where we know who to trust. When I was getting better, I decided I'm not trusting anybody except for Dr. Sarno and myself. This guy has explained it better than anybody else. I'm not listening to anybody else anymore. And I still basically only listen to Dr. Sarno and myself. There are people in the mind body field, great doctors like Howard Schubiner or Dave Clark, that I can listen to most of the time. They have great information. But I still hold back and I say, because they can sometimes have doubt too. Anybody can. And I'm watching out for doubt. I'm watching out for things that inspire doubt. And all I need is science and logic. And I won't go with anything else. But I've got to hold my critical thinking right up here. I'm the one who ultimately decides what I do believe. And I won't let anybody decide that for me. Okay, Susan, let's keep talking about it. I do know it's hard to overcome. But as you gain confidence in your ability to trust your own mind, you can do it. But there are various challenges. I would want some follow-up from you if you want about what are the hard parts about it, so we can keep talking about it. Before I get into a couple more comments, I just want to mention some of the resources on my website. My website is www.crushingdoubt.com. You can also put in .org. That works as well. But there are various resources on the website, and the two main resources, until I get my book up there, which will be a third main resource, are the teaching seminars and the groups. The teaching seminars are designed to bring down your doubt, and they tell everything about mind-body experience, the whole mind-body world. Why does one person say this and another person says this? And how do we make sense of it all in one system? It also describes my system, tells all the details of the 3 columns and how to work them. By the end of the seminar, people's doubts about whether they have mind-body symptoms or not and whether they're conquerable tend to be pretty low. What's usually left is, can I do it? And how do I implement it? And that's where you can go over to the groups. The groups are available for sign up on my website as well. And the groups are somewhat similar to the Q&A in their format, because they are question and answer sessions. But they're private Zoom calls. They're not recorded. And we get a lot further in each sitting. Because if you notice here, I ask people, let's follow up here. And then I get a follow-up question. And then I say something. But there we have one conversation. And we go straight through it for usually about 10 minutes or so with each person. And we get to a new place. We get to a new understanding. A question gets answered more fully. And I can find out more what's going on with them. They can ask me about why I'm saying what I'm saying. And that allows us to get further. So if you have interest in that, you can also email me if you have questions about it, dan@crushingdoubt.org, or just check it out on the website, www.crushingdoubt.com or .org. Okay. All right. Darlene said, my sister took meds and never got better. I'm not against meds for others at all. I feel I may fail like she did. Aha. This is really interesting. Did you notice, Darlene, doubt is getting you on both sides, which is very typical of doubt. It's not fair. It will bother you in any direction or both. What it's saying to you is, you can't get better unless you're on meds. And if you get better, if you take meds, you might not get better at all. Look what happened to your sister. And you could be a failure just like her. Doubt doesn't even have to make a logical argument. It's got the easy job. It can just say a bunch of crap that scares you, and then it wins for that moment. Our job is to never believe it. So you don't need meds to get better. What happened with your sister isn't necessarily going to happen to you at all. Her not getting better on meds doesn't necessarily mean meds don't work. It also doesn't necessarily mean she can't get better at all. In fact, it doesn't mean that. None of this is true, but doubt uses all of it. So what I want to say to you, Darlene, is this. Each and every one of you has much more control over this than you realize. And I don't mean that critically if you feel like you're not getting there. I mean it as a piece of hopefulness. These are mind-body experiences. What that means is, as soon as we get our minds under control, we can get the symptoms under control. Now, a lot of times the doubt is, can I get my mind under control? I understand that, but you can. And that's actually what my seminars and my groups and these Q&As and my book and everything that I do is for. They are to convince you, how will you get better? Why will you get better? Why can you be certain you'll get better? All of that is where we're going. Okay. Now, what I'm hearing, sure, you're having doubts, but everybody has doubts. What I want you to think about is, okay, today's a bad doubt day. Don't think of it as maybe doubt's right. Doubt's never right. It is right 0% of the time. Now, it doesn't matter what I think. It only matters what you think, Darlene. But I want to hear from you. What do you think about what I just said? Because it only matters what you think. Let's see where your mind went with that. Pink Blue Bonnet, thank you for joining us here on Instagram. Okay. Darlene said, oh, wow, it did win on both sides. Now, listen, when it wins on both sides, you know it's full of shit because it just argued two completely opposite points. And that's a good sign. Then she also said, I know I don't have to decide right now, and it is my choice. It just felt overwhelming since I am working so hard on the columns. Listen, don't worry about meds one way or another. They can help you. You don't need to do it. That's not what's going to matter. What's going to matter is the columns. I'll help you get your thinking under control, and then doubt won't run away with things and bother you so much. Okay? Okay, LJP Wright, I'm going to answer your question shortly. I got to get back over to a couple questions from YouTube, then I'll get to you over there. All right, Hillel said, when it comes to anxiety, do you think it's best to focus on the source, i.e. things in the emotions column, or to accept the anxiety and focus on what you're doing in the moment? Sometimes I need to just, okay, Russell, let me see. I got to think about what it is that you're saying. I'm going to read it one more time to myself. I guess I'm reading it out loud. When it comes to anxiety, do you think it's best to focus on the source, things in the emotions column, or to accept the anxiety and focus on what you're doing in the moment? Okay. Here's what I'll say, Russell, and I hope this is helpful. Any question, anytime I'm facing anything, any symptom or any situation, I'm mostly just thinking about the column. So when you ask, do you think it's best to focus on the source or accept the anxiety and focus on what you're doing in the moment? Those are two potential answers. But rather than focus on what's the right solution, I'm actually much more focused first on what's the problem of this moment, because that will determine what to do. Okay, so sometimes focusing on the source is going to be the thing to do. Sometimes accepting the anxiety and focusing on what you're doing in the moment, that's going to be the thing to do. But you know what's going to determine it, Russell and everybody else, is the columns. So what I would want you to do is take any moment and think, what's happening in the columns? Am I having an emotional onset or uptick in symptoms? If that just happened, I'd focus on the source. If it's happened, but it's staying there, then I'd focus on the doubt. It all depends on how the symptom is behaving. If you have it down to kind of a symptom plateau, or you notice that you're feeling out of power, I'd go straight to power. So it's not so much about what are we going to do as the first question. The first question is, what's bothering us? What is leading to the issue? So I understand what you're asking, but back up for a second. You may already have done this, Russell, but do it again. Back up and think. There's only 3 columns. I can find information on what's going on with me in all 3 columns, and they will inform what I can do, what I need to do. Okay, I hope that's helpful, but do let me know. Okay, Hillel has a follow-up. Some of doubt's answers. 1, it's been like this for years. There must be a reason. 2, after the pain is created, it can only disappear from a strong distraction or other pain. And 3, any chair that does not have perfect support for a certain area of the back will create pain in that area of the back. I have counters to all of them, but doubt and the pain just don't move. So annoying. Okay, listen, doubt is very annoying, but let's hear the quality of your counters and let's kind of compare notes. So 1, it's been like this for years. There must be a reason. Yeah, that reason is doubt. That is the reason. So if doubt's saying, oh, it's been like this for years, there must be a reason, you're like, guess what, doubt? It's you. You are the reason. What does it say back to you then, Hillel? I don't know if that was your counter or not, but it is the reason. You know, things can be the same way for years until there's a new understanding. It happens all the time. Sometimes it happens in families where a parent's not understanding a kid and they finally get what they're saying, and then things finally change after decades. It's happened to me. It's happened to many people. There are also times where it doesn't change because it's not about doubt. It's about this immovable force of the other person. That can happen. But things can change with new understanding. That's just that other person not understanding. That's not about impossibility. Okay, after the pain is created, it can only disappear from a strong distraction or other pain. That may be what you've experienced, but I've worked with thousands of people, and many of them have had things disappear for other reasons besides the strong distraction or the pain. What that shows is just how far your belief has gone so far. That's it. That's the only thing that tells us. So let's see what doubt would do with that. And then any chair that does not have perfect support for a certain area of the back will create pain in that area of the back. How come it doesn't happen for most people? How come just for some of the lucky ones like us? That doesn't make sense. And you know that. Now, you also said I have counters to all of them, but doubt and the pain just don't move. To me, what that's saying is even with the good counters, you're just having trouble being certain. So it's one thing to fight doubt. It's another thing to settle into actual certainty, to say, you know what? I know this. I don't need to question it anymore. I think that's where you're struggling here, Hillel. I think that's why it's not budging just yet. You're not certain. The goal is to move to certainty. I have something in the book that I call the fear confidence spectrum. And we move through the different forms of doubt. Fear is the worst doubt. We can barely even think straight. We're so afraid of what's happening. But once we get that down, we're not so afraid, but we're still really confused. Confusion is the next form of doubt. The next one down from that is a lack of certainty. And then below that is questions that we still have. But what's actually at the other end? Complete confidence, complete certainty. We can get you there, Hillel, but that's essentially why the doubt and the pain isn't moving yet. You're not certain yet. And I understand it's annoying, but the good news is we have a roadmap to get there. We need certainty. Okay? All right. Great to see you again, Dr. Dan. Again, I can't pronounce your name because it's a jumble of letters, but I know who you are, and I'm glad to have you back here, my friend. I see you do have a question. I'm going to get to it in a second, but I wanted to get over to LJP Wright on Instagram. Okay. How can I reduce hypervigilance? Just touching the area causes extreme pain. I guess I also mean how to reduce hypersensitivity. Okay. So I'm going to answer the question mostly in relation to hypersensitivity, but I want you to follow up if there's a hypervigilance element to it. Hypervigilance is when you can't stop paying attention to something because you feel there's danger. And you might be having that because of hypersensitivity. So I can answer both, but I'm going to answer hypersensitivity first. Well, let me say this actually. I'll answer hypervigilance in general, which is that hypervigilance will go away when you're less scared. When the danger feels lower, you're not going to be so vigilant. And when is the danger going to get lower? For multiple reasons, but one of them will be when you reduce your symptoms. So when you can reduce your symptoms, that hypervigilance will go way down. And that brings me to the next question, hypersensitivity. Okay, so hypersensitivity, you said just touching the area causes extreme pain. So there's a hypersensitivity in how it feels, whether on the skin or in the muscles. I'm not sure what the specific issue is, and you can tell me, but it actually doesn't matter. It matters to you, of course. It sucks, and the specifics matter. But from a mind-body perspective, it doesn't matter where it is. It all behaves the same. And so you're having hypersensitivity to the touch. Well, the thing that we would want to do is a couple things, but it always comes back to the columns. I would want to analyze this symptom through the columns. Was it an onset or an uptick? Because if so, we want to think emotionally, and that could bring down that hypersensitivity. If it's a doubt, we want to nail that doubt to the wall, and we want to bring that doubt down, and that could change the hypersensitivity. It also could be a power issue, but it sounds not so likely because the extreme symptoms tend to be in the emotions and doubt column. Power column symptoms can be pretty uncomfortable, especially when you're processing the fullness of your trauma, but most of the time they're lower level. So I'd be looking at, is this an onset or an uptick and thus emotional, or is this doubt related? I have a hunch it's doubt related because it sounds like it's been there for a while. So the way to do this, how to reduce the hypersensitivity, is to change what you actually believe. Because what you believe is what's driving this. Possibly what you're feeling, but I think belief is probably going to be the main thing. This is just a hypothetical to entertain for now until you can see that it really is real. But if you start exploring what you're thinking about this and you see there's an actual shift, it's going to change the whole way you think about this symptom and every symptom you're ever going to have. Because a huge way to reduce hypersensitivity or any other symptom is to come to full certainty. Same with Hillel. Full certainty that the mind-body link is the explanation. That is why it's happening. When you can start to really believe that physical symptoms are happening purely 100% for mind-body reasons, not only does that bring down your doubt, but it also brings down the symptom. You're much less afraid of it. Right now, there's still fear about the physicality of it, and I understand that. But I will tell you, when I hear extreme pain or extremely severe, that to me actually is a sign it is mind-body. The worst pains I've ever had, by far, are mind-body. It's not even close. And that's true for everybody I've ever met. So let's see where that goes with you, but think about it in terms of the columns. Okay, she says, thanks. Yes, it has been there a while. Doubt is self-doubt because of duration. Okay, but let's get this more articulated. So it's been there for a while. What is it? What you're actually saying to yourself? I mean, listen, I'm not saying dismissively, oh, it's been there a while. Like that's nothing. Of course, that's something. But I want to get at the specifics. What does it mean to you? Does it mean there must be tissue damage? Does it mean we must have the wrong idea? Does it mean that nobody can help me? Does it mean I can't understand what it is? Let's find out what it means. When we do that, we're going to start to make inroads in your thinking. Okay? Okay, Darlene says, yes, you nailed it. Doubt acts like a friend who knows me better than anyone else and hates to be challenged. Doubt sucks. Thank you, Dan. Doubt does suck. It's the worst. I mean, it caused me 8 years of back pain. So if, I'm right there with you. Doubt is the worst. And that's one of the reasons I love nailing it to the wall for everybody, because it deserves it. All right, let's keep going. All right, here comes a question. One question I have for you is, what do you recommend for your patients or yourself when you don't have enough sleep and you're experiencing pain symptoms? Mainly wondering about this because I have a fear that if I don't get enough sleep, I won't be able to function well the next day. I used to have that myself as well. While I do notice that I'm not at 100%, I'm trying to figure out how much my perceived tiredness and lack of function is generated by doubt and my mind. Okay, great questions. And as always, I'm going to answer this the first time through, but follow up as needed. The first question is essentially this: how much does sleep impact us? Does it actually increase symptoms? And I want to tell you, I can say definitively, there's no actual link. There's no link where getting less sleep will make you have more pain. That's not the case. What it can do is get you into a worse mindset, and that can lead to pain. But they are not actually directly correlated, and that's a very important point. The key word here is directly. They have no direct link. So if you challenge that, you can say, no. I'm tired and I'm having pain symptoms, but they're independent. And in fact, this brings me to the next question, or actually one of the questions. You said, how much of my perceived tiredness and lack of function is generated by doubt in my mind? There you go. Think of the fatigue as just another symptom. Don't think one symptom causes another. That's actually a huge mistake that a lot of doctors make and a lot of people get fed, is the idea that one symptom leads to another. Generally speaking, I find that is not the case. What is usually the case is that the mind generates the symptoms, and that's it. It comes from the mind, and it goes to multiple symptoms or individual symptoms, but it is not usually one symptom causes another. This symptom, like my knee pain led to my hip pain. Nope. Compensation arguments are complete garbage. I understand how people could think it potentially logically, but it's not the case. One symptom doesn't lead to another. So I would think of the fatigue as just its own symptom and decouple those two. It's not going to have any effect. I mean, sure, you could be tired for a little while, but then you'll fall asleep. Your bodies, we've all gone through, the human race has gone through millions of years of evolution to get to this point. We can handle all kinds of things. None of these things affect us as much as we think. Now, it is true, lack of sleep can lead to not being able to concentrate as well sometimes. But at the same time, if you think about it, if you're really excited about something, you usually can manage anyway on even 2 hours of sleep. Now, I'm not recommending that in general, and you do get tired eventually. But we got to decouple these ideas. All right, so let's start with that. Although, actually, did you have other? Let me just check if you had another question. Yeah, okay, so mostly I want to see what you think about that. My assertion is this: I have had 2 hours of sleep and been excited about a day and had a great time. And I have had 9 hours of sleep and felt incredibly tired and unable to concentrate and not at my best. there really isn't a lot of correlation between that. And even whatever correlation there is in there is going to be pretty weak. But doesn't matter what I think, it matters what you think. So let's hear from you. Lower Court, thanks for joining us here. LJP writes, says, why do symptoms show up in particular places? Okay, so symptoms show up in particular places for a variety of reasons. Emotions column symptoms tend to show up metaphorically. What do I mean by that? If someone's being a headache, you're more likely to get a headache. If somebody makes you sick to your stomach, you're more likely to have that happen. Symptoms express different things. When I sneeze, it's because of a minor irritation, which is what a sneeze is. An itch is something pretty minor. But if you're feeling like really nauseated, that means you can barely stand something. You cannot contain something. If something hurts like hell, like if there's heartache, listen, it happens there for a reason. Now, that's one of the reasons that symptoms show up in particular places, but here's another reason symptoms show up in particular places. The mind-body defense, which is essentially there to hide things from us, just like any other defense, it's a very smart and sophisticated one, and it's going to show up where it's most believable. So if there's something that I call like a doubt trigger, where there's something in the environment where, oh, I hit my elbow and now I get a symptom there, that's very plausible. So that's not metaphorical. That's more related to doubt and an event. It goes where it can stay the longest. When it comes to the emotions column, it's purely metaphorical. It's expressing something in terms of what the body can express. But when it comes to doubt, it's going to the place that's most believable. In short, those are the two main reasons why symptoms show up in particular places. Let's hear what you think about that. Okay. S says, hi, glad I caught you. Good to see you here. I see you have a question coming up. Susan Sereno said, that's exactly it, Dan. Well, thank you, Susan. Now I have to see that was actually from a while ago. So I nailed something, but I don't know what it was. But thank you for saying that, Susan. I appreciate it. Okay. If my insurance doesn't cover PRT / mind-body medicine, that's a particular kind of therapy that is done in the mind-body community. Mind-body medicine practicing therapist, what do you think I could say to my therapist to inform them enough to be able to help me treat my mind-body syndrome? Thank you. Okay. That's a really good question. And what I would say is of course it's going to depend. And this is where, like, if we were in group, I'd ask you lots of questions and we go back and forth and I'd be able to nail it. Here, I'm going to try, but I want you to follow up as needed. What I would actually do is ask the therapist, what do you need to know about this to be able to help me? First of all, the very first question is I would want to know, is that therapist open to the idea? Because believe it or not, unfortunately, a lot of therapists aren't. I tried to bring this to a therapist I was seeing at the time I discovered Dr. Sarno, and he was a complete Philistine about it. He just was like, okay, you read Dr. Sarno and you got better in a couple months. I think your back just finally healed after 8 years. Well, that's asinine. There's no way that happens. So you have to first see, are they open to it? If they're open to it, though, then it's just about the format of them learning about it. They could read a book by Dr. Sarno. Once my book is out, they could read that book. In fact, that would be one of my number one recommendations. They could watch some of my videos on the podcast. But basically, the bottom line is this. It's got to be a discussion. And the therapist simply needs to be open to hearing about these things and considering it. They got to learn about it. And what you could say to your therapist is find out if they're open to it. If they're not open to it, I would suggest maybe we find somebody else. But if they are open to it, then you can talk about, all right, well, how do you want to learn about this information? By the way, you also could teach them about it. You could be like, I know enough about it. I'll explain the details, and they ask questions. But ultimately, it's about if they have the right information, then they will be able to help you with it. Now, here's another thing, though. Many times people get a lot out of working with me in my groups on the columns while they're doing the other therapy. And this does two things. First of all, it makes it so that I can take care of the column stuff and the symptoms, and they can work on the other stuff. But it also makes it so there's a lot you can bring back to your therapy. Okay, so there's plenty of ways to do it. The main thing I'll encourage you is don't feel helpless here. You can make this what you need it to be, and tell the therapist what you need. Tell them what you're looking for, and we'll go from there. Okay. Okay. LJP Wright says, why feet, for example? Okay. If it was emotional, remember, if it was doubt, like if you stand on your feet a lot, or you're a runner, doubt could easily just go there because it is potentially believable. Or it could be that, you have some family mythology that our feet aren't great. That could go there, right? It also, though, could be metaphorical, especially if it's an onset or an uptick. It could be that you are having trouble standing on your own 2 feet or taking a step forward. You know, these metaphors really can matter. So if that's part of what you're asking, LJP, right? Let's see what you think about that. But a lot of it's about stability and being able to support yourself from a metaphorical standpoint. Otherwise, I'd look at doubt. Okay. All right. Let's see. Hillel, follow up. I confront doubt in a debate 20 and even 30 minutes, but it feels like a never ending conversation. Doubt. I'm going to stop you right there. The reason I'm doing this, Hillel, is I want to show you something. It's loving these conversations. The longer you go in the conversations, the better it is. And remember, we talked about shutting down the conversation. We don't even want to entertain it. We want to just be like, shut your mouth. Nope, we're not hearing from you anymore. I'm not going to have a 20 to 30 minute debate with you. You're full of shit. I'm not listening. I'm not wasting my time on you. And again, this speaks to what I was saying before. The solution is to have you have complete certainty in what you think, and think that what it's saying is complete and utter shit. That's what we got to get to. So the longer it goes, shut it down. That's not going to help you. We need to get to the confidence that you know what you're talking about and it doesn't. It's weird. I feel that I know about a counter that is true. For example, it's been like this for years because of you, doubt. And for some reason, it doesn't feel completely certain to me. Weird. All right, well, we're on to it. It's all about certainty. How can I feel that the counter is true and yet not feel complete confidence in it? How can it coexist? That is because this is a power column thing, Hillel. You coming to feel that you know better than it or anyone. That's why you can't feel certain. I could, even things that I totally knew about, I couldn't feel certain until I mastered power. This is a power issue. Coming to feel that, no, I know exactly what I'm seeing. That's what the power column does. Okay, let's keep talking about it. Teresa says, thank you, Dan. So many good reminders. It's my pleasure. Okay. Laura Court says, I'm lucky that I have found a therapist that does a lot of work with people with fibromyalgia and uses the mind-body approach. That is fantastic, Laura. And I do want to say, I think more and more therapists are coming around to this. It's becoming a big part of how people work, especially people who are trauma-informed. They understand a lot of emotional stuff is carried in the body. But I'm really glad to hear you're having that experience. And I would encourage you guys that you can either find a therapist like that. I actually have also trained lots of people in my system, or you can come see me in the groups, or you can use me or one of my trained therapists adjunctively with therapy. So there's so many options. Just don't leave the mind-body approach out of whatever it is that you're doing, and you're going to be fine. Okay? All right. Thanks so much for your input, Dr. Dan. I shall try to decouple those two together. All right. That's the start. We're calling doubt into question, right? All right, then I have flat, super wide feet. I've been told all my life that I need orthotics and that running might be hard for me. Have you dealt with patients that have non-standard feet? I do, and in fact, I don't. Mostly, I don't really. I mean this supportively. I don't believe in the concept of non-standard feet. I think that's one of those structural mislabelings that's gotten us into trouble. Nobody's got normal anything, and yet we all have normal things for the most part. Flat, super wide feet shouldn't do anything. Absolutely should have no effect on your running or anything else. This is the kind of thing that they've described because they're not understanding things. And I hope that's helpful, but let's do follow-up as needed. You don't need to worry about that, though, at least as far as I'm concerned. But let's see what you think. Okay, Hillel says, also, it's very random, but I'm curious. What's your view on dissociative identity disorder? To me, it seems like evidence that not all mind-body issues are benign and reversible. Ah, interesting. Wait, hold on. Okay, that's the same thing. Let me see if you said anything more about that. Okay, what do I think about dissociative identity disorder? Listen, first of all, I'm not really big on disorders and syndromes. I think that I'm not saying that about you, Hillel, like you shouldn't say that at all. But I'm just advocating I want society to drop disorder and syndromes and recognize that everything is just symptoms. Dissociative identity disorder, what is it actually? It's a bunch of symptoms where we have split off parts of our identity that aren't aware of each other. It's a very extreme situation. It doesn't happen to most people at all. But when it does happen, it's just a psychological defense. Everything is a symptom with a psychological defense. That's it. There's nothing else. So when you say, oh, maybe they aren't benign and reversible, I think that something like dissociative identity disorder or whatever we're going to call it is actually reversible because all it takes is integration. All it takes is taking away the danger and the defense isn't needed anymore. And that's it. So even that's benign and reversible. Now, is it benign from the standpoint that it can wreak havoc? No, that's not benign, but it is benign in that it is actually reversible. Darlene says, thanks for everything, Dan. It is my pleasure, Darlene. Let's see. S then says, appreciate the insight. My therapist is definitely someone I trust so far a couple sessions in, and he's aware of Sarno. Beautiful. As I mentioned it to him, he does seem open. So I'll continue informing him. Yeah, I mean, I would say the main thing is see if he's willing to read something about this, or maybe look at one of my podcast episodes. I'm going to develop a playlist that's basically like a getting started playlist. But I have a list of that if you want to email me, dan@crushingdoubt.org. And that would be a good thing to recommend to him to just check out. But for now, have him read Sarno. Come September, you can have him read me or both. I have full confidence in what Sarno says, as well as what I say. Okay, we're going to finish up on a couple things. Hillel then says, every time I hear that it's about power, it feels difficult. Power seems like such a big and distant concept to me. It's as if doubt says, good luck, come back when you're strong, when you're in power. I totally get you, Hillel, but that's actually just doubt also. Doubt is using anything against you it can. In this case, it's using the idea that, oh, power's far away and it's really hard. Why are we listening to doubt about anything? It's a liar about everything. And so it doesn't know that power is going to be hard to get to. Why do you believe that? And let's look at that. It's not that hard to get to. I can get people there fast, and I can get you there fast. And actually, since I've known you, you've been becoming more and more powerful, and doubt's not going to be able to stop you. And I'm not scared about this at all. And ultimately, I got to help you feel the same way. Okay, LJP Wright says, yes, thanks. So I think that was in relation to feet metaphors and things like that, but I hope that was helpful. Okay, we'll finish up on these two questions. Kasim says, makes sense. I'm getting better at knowing when I am in a trauma state. This is when he was asking if trauma activation would end once you get to the fullness of your trauma. I'm looking forward to being more powerful and becoming who I truly am, loving me and seeing my value after a life of shame. I would love that, Kasim, and you're well on your way to that. And we're just going to keep that. We're going to keep that going. You know, the great thing is with the columns, you can't be stopped. The only thing that can stop you is doubt. So if you just recognize doubt or push through it or work with me or whatever it is, as long as you don't let doubt derail you, you will get there. And you will get to that emotional awareness in the emotions column and lower doubt in the doubt column and self-alignment in the power column, just like I was talking about with Hillel. And it's not as hard as doubt wants you to think at all. Not at all. I've cracked the code. Okay, Hillel says, thanks for the answers, Dan. Helpful as usual. My pleasure, Hillel. Okay, last question or comment. Ayub says, I feel like I can't breathe well with my left side of the body, especially on the left arm, and I have a nerve in my arm that hurts. I've done all the tests, and the tests are always negative. I think you were going to continue with that. But Ayub, in the interest of time, I'm going to answer what I think I can for now, and you can come back next week if you want to follow up more, or you can email me, dan@crushingdoubt.org. I do want to say this. It does not matter what the symptom is. If ultimately doctors aren't finding anything that is, anything that is life-threatening, then it's mind-body. And the body can do anything. The mind can make the body do anything that the body's even capable of doing. So is the body capable of having you not breathe well? Yep. Is it capable of having the left side of your body hurt or because of the breathing? Yep. Is it capable of making your left arm hurt or that nerve hurt? Yep. So the question, Ayub, would be to start exploring the idea of mind-body experience. If this can start to make sense of what you're seeing, much more than anything else, then we're on our way. We start to get the link between the mind and the body, and we can start to deconstruct it and help you not worry that this is anything else. Based on what you're telling me, you've done all the tests. They would have found something if there was something to worry about. Doctors are actually really good for that. You can trust them for that. So go with that, and let's start looking into the mind-body experience and what it can explain. I would encourage you, Ayub, to get in contact with me, Dan at crushingdoubt.org, and we can talk about different ways of doing that. Okay, no pressure, but you also can just check out my website, which is www.crushingdoubt.com or .org. And also a reminder that my teaching seminars, which are pre-recorded, teach you all about mind-body experience, everything you need to know to bring down doubt, make sure you know that you can get better. It's all there right on the website. Just click the links for the seminars and you can start on them right away. If you want my actual interaction, you can come to the groups. They're once, twice, or 3 times a week. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Mondays are 5 p.m. Eastern. Wednesdays, 12 p.m. Eastern. Fridays, 2 p.m. Eastern. I also have a power column group that just works on power. That's Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. If you're interested in any of these or you have questions, just let me know. Or check them out on the website. Okay? All right. Rita says, thanks, Dan. It is my pleasure. Ayub says, thank you very much, Dan. My pleasure. And welcome. This is the first time I've seen you here, so I'm glad you're chiming in with any question you have. Guys, it has been a pleasure as always. I will be here same time next week, and we'll keep it right on rolling. Keep those questions coming. You got to get your answers, because that's what's going to change what goes on up here, and that's what's going to change what goes on all through the body. Okay, guys, it's been a pleasure. Looking forward to talking to you again. Take care.